Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of The Gifted, the latest episode of The Flash, as well as the latest episode of Black Lightning. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I'll start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of The Gifted, you can skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of The Flash, and or skip to what I had to say about this week's episode of Black Lightning. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of The Gifted. A lot went down in this episode, so let's kind of break everything down. We kind of understand a little bit more. We kind of get a little more context to why Caitlin kind of put so much effort going for it when it comes to Andy, because she's kind of had to fight for Andy even before he was literally born. Like, when he was still inside of her, because like around the time she was 5 months pregnant, they were kind of suggesting potentially terminating a pregnancy, even at that stage, just because it would have put her life at risk if that, in that case. And it's just kind of like, no, we can't do that. The fact of the matter is there's already the situation, Lauren, and we can't do that, with Andy. So she wanted to fight, she'd already made up her mind, and we see that kind of get reflected in the episode. But the fact is that Caitlin's willing to do whatever. She's willing to put this dude through withdrawal just to get the information they need, as well as even going as far as getting him high and then dosing him more and more, and even going like, hey, when this is all said and done, you get to take whatever drugs, this and whatever else is left here, so you can take it with you, just to keep him motivated to do what they need, because she's that desperate to get her son back. And even Reed's like, we can't do this. Even going as far as being like, and he brings up a good point later on, it's like, you want to bring our son back to this, but how are we any better than those people who are willing to do whatever going to any extreme for what they believe in? And it's like, you doing the same isn't a good thing, It's kind of like this whole situation, but it's like you understand her desperation, because you thought things for a moment, you thought with the clarity of the family and everything, a lot of their grievances and stuff aired, you thought things would be better, especially because, they apologized to Lauren, Lauren apologizes to them. And, it seemed like, oh, everything's good. But it's like, it still didn't solve the underlining thing of like, hey, our son, Andy's gone. And it's just like, her desperation as a mother to bring him back. Like I said, it's just interesting, because they gave you that context of like why she fights even harder for him, because she's had to fight hard for him even before he was born, So I thought that was kind of pretty neat. You also had Reed talking to John about his powers. The whole situation, it seems like basically Reed is trying to medicate himself to keep his power, like anxiety pills and stuff like that, to keep his powers in check. Because for him, it's like, there's no time to like, try and train to control my powers. The fact of the matter is, this is an uphill battle they're up against. There's so much going on right now, and he feels like he needs to be in control right now. But John is saying like, that won't be a permanent fix. It'll happen. It will work for a little bit, but he needs to properly train, because there's no way to fully suppress them now that they're coming out. Because and it's even something Reed talked about, I thought was kind of interesting. It's like, he feels like his powers are coming out at an accelerated rate, because I guess it's like his body, or at least the mutant gene inside of him, I guess is trying to compensate for the fact is that it's been essentially docile for a large chunk of so much of his life. And I guess it's trying to like compensate. So it's all hitting him all at once. So probably his mutant ability might be a little trickier to kind of deal with, just because of the circumstances around it coming about. At least every typical mutant will come into their powers once they kind of reach adolescence. And so they eventually will kind of like, especially considering the emotional situation they're under too. Of course, his powers are going to kick in like that. But I think it's also probably like after effects of the experiments his dad put on him, like that might have had some altering effect to his abilities as well. So that's something we got to keep in mind. And also, when we keep going forward with this whole situation, to see like what ends up being the root situation with his powers, Now, another part of this is obviously like everyone else's desperation. Clarice is the only one that's kind of being the most like, should we really do this? Like the way Marcos talked about Lorna and Andy not wanting to do this, even Evangeline telling you we might have to kill them. But like John's desperate too, because he doesn't want to have to do that. Just as much as Lauren's desperate to get Andy back and Marcos is as desperate to get Lorna back, the fact of the matter is John is just as desperate too, because he doesn't want to have to kill his friends. He doesn't want to have to fight his friends. He wants to find another way around this. And so he's kind of willing to go as far as well too. It's also interesting because there's a whole thing of like him being bulletproof. I was like, oh, is that going to be kind of like, so he's kind of like a Luke Cage? It's like not necessarily, because shotguns close enough can still pierce his skin. It won't go through, but it's enough to kind of leave some scars and stuff like that. I wonder, does he heal fast or not, just because of his whole circumstance? I mean, maybe not. I don't know if that's really come up about whether he has like a healing factor or not. But it is kind of interesting that Clarice is kind of like the only kind of sort of voice of reason to kind of like, hey, we need to be careful about this situation. But we end up learning that they went to a mental facility, and it seems like this is what this was all about. Like all of Andy's training, because they feel the building shaking. It's like that's what this was all about. The break-in that he was training for. I didn't know what it was, and it's like, this is a mental facility that a lot of mutants get sent to, and so it's kind of interesting. It seems like their main objective was going after one particular mutant. Granted, we still don't know who it was. It was someone that was locked in a basement. That's like where the most dangerous like mutants are located. And the fact is, they walked away with one, means this person is super mega dangerous, which means they must be so powerful that Reva needs them, which is interesting. I guess because she doesn't have the full force of like the Fenrir, Andy and Lauren. So it makes you wonder what this person's power would be like compared to theirs. Like, I mean, I guess like convincing Andy is one thing just because Andy's just very powerful on his own. But I guess like convincing Lauren would have been another thing in itself entirely. So, I mean, I guess Andy was kind of a means to an end in this regard too, but he's still needed for the fight to come. Same thing for Lorna. It is so interesting that they are the most kind of like, hey, we believe in this. But I don't know. Because initially you could make the argument maybe they were afraid, like to some extent, like, hey, we're afraid that, Reva will kill us. I mean, they know she will kill them given a chance. But then it turns into the situation of, it does seem like maybe they enjoy, I mean, Andy kind of does, because that kind of turns into a thing, because it's like, Reed is like, you saw what I saw. Like, Andy isn't being forced to do any of this. He was smiling, causing all that destruction and stuff. He was kind of happy about it. So I don't know. Maybe Andy's the one that's the most in line with all this. It seemed like Lorna doesn't seem like she's enjoying it as much as he is. I mean, at least the expression we saw, because when she saw Clarice and John, because John was talking to her about like how, because she has a history with the place too, and that's like, hey, we know. He's like, I know this place has bad memories for you and how hard it is for you to be here. So just talk to me. And so she just lets all these mutants out. Like, she could have done more, but the fact is she did probably the least she could to just keep them distracted. So that begs the question of like, is she really as into, like, I think probably running into Marcos again probably left her a little bit more conflicted, which is a thing in itself, because Marco is like, even Marcos had to admit, when it's all said and done, we're probably going to have to fight Andy and Lorna, but Lauren didn't want to listen because she's like, I'm the one that has to bring Andy in. It's like, my dreams are telling me that I will be the one. And she stops the car, which is very impressive, using her powers to stop a big, like, car like that. It shows you just how powerful Lauren is too. But now they both know that they've each been having a dream, which maybe Andy's not really going to pay too much attention to that. It's kind of interesting because he was so scared of her seeing him as a monster and stuff like that. But I guess like his conversation with Reva kind of changed his mind, because for him, it's like, it doesn't matter what happens, because the fact of the matter is, this is for Lauren's sake as well. So if I need to knock you out of the way to ultimately save you, then so be it. Because even when it was all said and done, you saw what happened at the end. Before he got in the car, he looked at his own reflection, because, like I said, that fear is still there. But he ended up hurting Lauren, and she's kind of knocked unconscious. So we'll see what that ends up being. All the while in this episode, we also have the Jace situation. Things aren't working with Paula, because for Paula, it's like, yeah, I lost Grace. I will always love Grace. But the fact of the matter is, I need to move on. Like, Jace is kind of stuck where he is. He's saying like, no, let me just do this, and then I will come back to you. Kind of like the job will be over and everything. But she's like, the job will never be over, because even if it's just this group of mutants, because these mutants had nothing to do with Grace. Yes, they might be connected to what happened to your partner, but they had nothing to do with Grace. You're just using this as an excuse. You're just going to keep going and going and going. There's always going to be more mutants. There's always going to be another mission. You're just obsessed with all of this, and she doesn't want to do that anymore. So she's like, don't call anymore. It's kind of interesting, and I thought it was kind of well done. And the fact is, he's almost about to look up marriage counseling when he gets the call from Wilson. So it's like, just when he takes those steps in one direction, the other side of things, his obsession, mutants and everything, kind of pulls him in the other. never crossed my mind to think Officer Wilson was a purifier. So it's like, okay. And even Jace had his reluctancy with the whole purifier situation, but his Officer Wilson's like, oh, you think we're some kind of bad group? He's like, well, the fact of the matter, hate group or whatever like that, which is so interesting considering the fact is that Jace seems like he hates mutants, but I guess in his mind it's like, no, these are dangerous mutants. Mutants in general, yes, blah, 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 but I'm after the most dangerous ones, but that distrust can easily turn into hate, and I think it's going to definitely be a slippery slope that Jace ends up going down, because we saw in the first season he did have a heart. Like, Paula was able to kind of convince him, Reed and Caitlin were able to kind of convince him about like handling the situation a little bit differently, and it's not their fault things went down the way they did. That was literally the Frost sisters. That was the inner circle. And as we know, that whole thing, like probably going about things that way, was more so the Frost sisters handling things their way. But I'm sure that was Reva, because like all those decisions were made because they serve, like, they're kind of like Reva's right hand girls. So it's kind of like, oh yeah, like whatever they do, she kind of backs their play on them. So it's probably like everything they did, she was fine with. The inner circle probably didn't like it, because it's like, that's a lot of Sentinel service stuff, attention you've kind of drawn towards that we really don't like and need. So there's that. The whole point I'm trying to make is that Jace has shown that he does have a side where he is not completely subdued by hate. So I think that is something to keep in mind. But joined with this group, he may submit to his hate. Seeing what happened at the Linwood facility, which, hey, it's like, oh, this mutant attack. Notice none of them died. I mean, granted, there was some blood everywhere, but I don't, well, it seemed like maybe there might be some people that died, but at least the staff weren't killed. Interesting considering the fact is Lorna has a connection to the place. She could have killed them, but she did. So I think that speaks volumes. The Frost sisters probably are the main reason why a lot of people died. I just kind of get that feeling, but that's just me. So we at least know some of the Frost sisters have like a real problem about that. Asmay seems to be the one that's kind of like more least reluctant, but at the same time it's like the most reluctant, I meant to say. And but like I said, we still don't know what that really means and what that means going forward, because obviously she's shown like, no, I'm not reluctant, I can do it too. But it's like, still, we'll have to wait and see. So this episode was kind of more of a gut punch for everybody, in a sense of realizing like, maybe there is no hope of getting Lorna or Andy back. They've made their decision and there might not be any going back for them. Also, like what's going to happen with Reed, because we see his powers kind of activating. And it's kind of sad with their family. It's just like everything's kind of falling apart on all cylinders. It's like they can't get Andy back. Caitlin's kind of spiraling and doing what she's doing. Reed is going through the situation he's going through with his powers, and he's trying to keep everything under control. Everything's falling apart. And then Lauren's kind of in the condition she's in right now, so it's kind of like that family just keeps losing on just all these different fronts. So a very interesting episode. I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this, like what the Mutant Underground's next move is going to be. There are quite a few mutants that were released. They were able to get some of them back, probably not like a whole bunch, maybe I don't know. There's at least some they probably took back, so maybe we could see at least, John kind of amassing more of an army in preparation to go, sadly, to war against the Inner Circle. So we'll see in the long run. But there's also that storyline back element we have to think about too, of Clarissa and Erg. I think that's kind of why she was probably more okay with it, them doing what they're doing, because she understands, because it's like you have to do whatever you have to do for the sake of getting this all done and hopefully winning in the end. I'm guessing and I'm assuming that everything that Clarice saw went down this episode, she's probably got to report to Erg, because he's like, oh yeah, like you have to be my eyes and ears. So probably he has to give him frequent updates, and she probably also definitely feels bad about keeping a secret from everyone. So like I said, I'm very interested to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. And now moving on to this week's episode of The Flash. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. I love the fact is that Nora shows up at a crime scene pretending to be Barry's new intern and everything, and Barry just has to be like, right, which is so interesting. Like that, I think that's so fun because now it's like we're going to see them working together both on the superhero side of things and the non-superhero side of things. So because she's just trying to make any excuse to be around Barry. Also kind of surprised me is the fact is they told everyone about Barry disappearing and him still being missing in the future, which I guess in retrospect it's kind of like, well, of course you tell everyone, but it's like, I don't know, the team has a tendency not to tell everyone everything, especially because you'd feel like Barry wouldn't want to tell Iris because she'd be worried. But what's interesting is the fact is that Iris is like, no, we've changed the future before, no matter what it said, so we can do it again. Like whatever happens, we'll face it and we'll change it if need be. So kind of, showing like, hey, we're not defeated. This isn't over. We can change things. Just because, like I said, they've had their face with the future before and they didn't give up then. We're not going to give up now. What I think is interesting is Nora's reaction to it later on because she's like, Mom took that a lot better than I thought she would. And she's like, and, Barry's like, yeah, Iris is tougher than she looks. It's even to the point, like, later on when Iris is helping out and everything, she's like, yeah, team West Allen. And then you see the look on Nora's face, almost like a disgusted look. And it's like, so it goes back to the question, what is her problem with Iris? Because even Iris talks to Joe about it. It's like, so now that makes sense why she spends so much time with Barry and not as much for me. And it's like, Joe's like, give it time. Eventually she'll come around. She'll reach out when she wants to. My initial thoughts then become two separate things. It's either that Iris became so obsessed with finding Barry that she wasn't really kind of the mother figure that Nora needed. Or maybe Nora holds it against her mom because her mom moved on. Barry was gone for so long that she she moved on. So, but the fact that she had the reaction of she handled it better makes me think, I mean, it can still fit with either one, especially because if it's like she became so obsessed, it's like, oh, the way mom's handling it now, it's like in the future she just kind of like became so consumed with it, nothing else mattered. It could be that, or it's just like, oh, she moved on, like she's accepting this with she's handling this with grace, and then just she's willing to fight for you now, but maybe she feels like in the future her mom wasn't as willing to. I don't know, because you can definitely tell it seemed like she resents Iris on some level, which I think is such an interesting thing, because it's like, because she doesn't talk about it, like why it is that, because at the beginning you really wouldn't have guessed that, but now it's like, in retrospect, it's like, man, you really see the disdain she has for her mom, so I'm curious to see what that's all about. Because it's almost like Iris can do nothing right in her eyes, just because she... Like I said, I'm so interested to find out which side of things it ends up being in that regard. So, but the metahuman they go up against this episode is Block, which is kind of interesting. She's able to make these blocks of compressed air and kind of use them as a shield, as also a means of compressing people into little dense cubes, which is interesting. I also love that Nora's touching it without a glove. It's like, what are you doing? Also, it's interesting because she's a rookie. I didn't realize that. It never crossed my mind to think about it, but she's a rookie in both regards of being like a CSI and a speedster. I wonder, when did she get her powers? And that's the question I keep bringing up too, is like, is being a speedster hereditary or not? In the sense of like, just because Barry's a speedster, does that mean she's one, or did she have to kind of get chosen by? Because we don't really know how she got her powers. Like, maybe it's only been fairly recently that she's actually gotten training to be a speedster. Because what I mean is like, because she's still kind of a novice at it and stuff like that. So it begs the question, well, Jay might not be around to help train her. So she probably everything she knows about being a speedster, she learned from, looking at Barry through the museum, as well as just kind of trial and error on her own, since there was no one there to help her. I mean, it does beg the question, well, what about Wally too, A lot we don't know about the status of Team Flash, what happens to them in the future. I mean, obviously she doesn't want to say anything because it's it's the future and everything, so it could change a lot. So there's that. So that in itself is just kind of interesting to me. It also ties into the story because she's trying to do a lot. Barry's trying to run her through the basics, but she's like, I'm your daughter, but it doesn't mean I'm a baby. And she tries to throw lightning and it ricochets and ends up hitting Barry, and she's so apologetic because she's like, I guess, I guess greatness isn't hereditary, because she's talking about all the great things that Barry's done. And, Barry goes to Joe about it. He's like, I don't know. She's not listening. And then, and Joe makes him realize it's like, hey, because you were the same way. You wanted to impress, me, because that was like the first year you had moved in with us. And it's like, everything she's doing is because she's trying to impress you, because she's like, all she knows about you is through that Flash Museum. She's like, that's all she has to hold on to you. So to her, it's like, you were hailed as this great hero, and she feels like, it's like, I gotta impress you, I gotta make you proud. And the fact of the matter is, like, I'm not good enough. It makes her kind of doubt herself a little bit too. She's just trying so much because she wants to impress Barry, which is it's because, like, and even Barry shows her, and I figured it would go to this point. Like, we as the audience know, Barry wasn't flawless as a speedster. He had his ups and downs, but the fact of the matter is he's kept going. He only got to here because he's failed and he's tried, It takes a lot of trial and error in this. And the fact of the matter, it's okay to fail, but the fact of the matter is, just because you fail doesn't mean, it's like, as a parent, you're not going to love them any less, that there's no such way of just being perfect all the time, which ties into Cecile's storyline in an interesting way, because Cecile is losing her powers, and for her, she had a connection with their daughter Jenna in a way. Because I was about to say, for her, it's like, she already had a daughter before, but the situation with Jenna is a little different. It's like, oh, I had this had this telepathic relationship with our daughter. I always knew what she wanted. I was like, oh, I could be the perfect parent, but there's no such thing as being the perfect parent. And because I think it comes from the fact is that, hey, like, I made all these mistakes the first time through, but now I have a chance to be the perfect parent that our daughter deserves. But it's like, you don't have to worry about something like that, because it's like, you're not expected to know everything. Like I said, like, you look at your daughter, your first daughter grew up great and fine, shows how much of a good mother you are. But, like I said, the fear of, like, oh, it's been such a long time. What if I kind of screw things up with this newborn, So, but hearing Joe's conversation with Barry, it kind of changed her mind to be like, it's okay, even if I fail, like, as long as my daughter knows that I love her, that's all that matters. So I thought that was kind of nice, like, tying those two storylines together in that sense, because she wanted to put, like, a mental thing on Jenna, so it's like, oh, we can hear her thoughts, and it's like, what? Don't worry. Harry used it on his daughter. Just because he used it on his daughter, don't mean we got to use it on ours. So it's kind of like, because I also interpret it as the fact of the matter is, and it kind of ties in. It's like, she had a connection with her baby. It's like, that's something that's kind of hard to give up too, because it's like, because it doesn't seem like she's as worried about losing her powers in that regard. It's more so like the fact is of, hey, our baby, like, which makes me wonder, could that be to the fact of the matter is that maybe the baby, whatever's there was kind of drifting away from Cecile because the power lies in the baby now. It's Jenna's ability. Maybe not. Maybe it's just, completely gone forever. But who knows? Maybe some of that transferred into Jenna as well. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see in that regard as she gets older. But I thought that was kind of a pretty nice whole storyline there in itself. So also, you got to give mad props to Nora being the badass she looks so cool. Like when Block was throwing all those blocks at her, and like she was cartwheeling as she was doing her speech. I'm like, yeah, I like her movements and stuff like that, because I feel like, Barry does it sometimes, but she was doing it a lot more, and I was like, yeah, that's so sick. They did it, like, kind of differentiating between her and her dad, and just like their styles of handling things. And I like that she basically took what she learned from Barry about, like, not doing too much that's beyond your skill level, because it ended up making Block train herself out. So that was pretty neat. Another aspect to this episode I really liked is the whole Cisco situation. Cisco's still dealing with the whole gypsy thing, and because of that, she's like, every time he vibes, he thinks of her. She's always in his head because their powers are connected in that regard. And so he has Caitlin and Ralph trying to help him out. I love Ralph being like, dude, I'm the perfect guy for this, because there's been no one who's been kicked out of the game of love more than me. And it's like, you take pride in that, because I guess for him, it's like, hey, I got kicked down so many times, but I got right back up. He has these 27 steps. And I love that they pretty much skipped over the entire list, because it's like, even Cisco being like, your motto in this is literally, you stole it from Yogi Bear. It's like, well, you don't see Yogi Bear dealing with any, like, Lady Bear issues, do you? So they skipped to 12. He gets all, like, changed up and everything. And it's kind of interesting because this kind of ties into Caitlyn's story too, because for Caitlyn, it's the whole thing about her dad. It's kind of interesting, like everyone's trying to distract themselves with everything else. To the point like Cisco, I love it, was kind of in a trance when everyone was trying to talk to him. It took Ralph being like, Han shots. Like, he's like, you shut up, you take that back. And that's like, sorry, buddy. Sorry I had to lie to you like that. It's just like, had to kind of snap you out of it. Caitlyn's trying to distract away from her situation by helping Cisco, and Cisco's trying to find distractions for his situations. So Caitlyn kind of blows up because for her, it's like if her dad's still alive, that means at any point in time he could have reached out to her, but he never did. So it makes her scared. Like, that means he didn't want to. But, Cisco is like, basically looking at Ralph's list, going down to the 27th one, is realizing like, hey, if this person was the love of your life, they would be here right now. So the fact is that they're not means that they're not. And so, it's kind of like certain truths you're not willing to face that you have to. In her case, it's like, this is a truth you need to face because it might not work out the way you want it to. Maybe he won't want anything to do with you, but the fact of the matter is, if you don't do this, if you don't look into it, you'll never know, and you'll always spend your life wondering. Now the question then becomes later on, can we find out her mom is the one who signed the death certificate apparently? So was she doing that on behalf of Caitlyn's dad? Because whatever's happening with him, maybe it's happening, like what happened with Caitlyn with the whole Killer Frost thing, maybe it happened to him too, and maybe he was losing control and he was scared to be around her. Or maybe it's just because like he was the one that, like I said, like it might be the situation of she was experimenting on, like the reason why her whole meta site has been around for so long, predating even the particle accelerator. Because that also becomes a question too. It's like, so even in the original timeline, like before Flashpoint, Caitlyn was a metahuman. It's just like her powers had never developed potentially. So I think that's something to kind of, keep in mind. Or was her life entirely different? Like before Flashpoint, was that even an element? Like I don't remember if her family ever really came up much. I think her mom did, not her dad, but that's just kind of an interesting thing to think about. I wonder, will that kind of circulate back into the story in any shape or form? Probably not, but still. And then final note about the episode too is the fact is we got a better look and understanding of our main antagonist this season, Cicada. At first I was curious because when he went up against Gridlock, it seems like, at first I was like, does he absorb powers? I thought he absorbed them and kind of made them his own. It seems that's not the case. That knife or whatever it is that he's using to stab people, that thing absorbs / negates meta abilities. My question is, does it like give him like some kind of power the way he was fighting everybody? It might just be that he's naturally a good fighter and he just is able to bring metas down to a human level again. It also seems like he can like, there is something to it because he can control it, because like it seems like he threw it into block and then he immediately kind of brought it back to himself because he was quite a bit of a distance away. So it has like some kind of magnetic connection to it. Like he can draw it in and throw it at it, like, which is interesting. And whatever it is, it can't be pulled out of the ground easily because even Cisco was pulling on it. So it has like some gravity to it. Like I said, I don't know if it's some level of like, because it doesn't seem like he's working it the same way DeVoe could kind of like possess a person's body and kind of take, well, like every time he jumped bodies, he was taking people's powers with him. It doesn't seem like it's that. It just seems like, I was wondering if it was like he more so got superhuman strong because of it. It didn't look like that. It just seems like I said, it just seems like, and it seems like Cisco kind of brought it up to that point too. It's like, it's more like it negates powers. Because even when it was stabbing Gridlock, it looked like it was drawing him in. So, like, I think it can temporarily negate abilities, or rather absorb them. But, like, I think he has to kill a meta to fully absorb their powers. So it's like, because like I said before, I feel like the way he was like, for all of you to die, I'm thinking he's killing metahumans because he has a problem with them, which is interesting. That's never really come up in the show. Like, a potential metahuman hater, like, he must have had a bad run-in with a metahuman, so he wants them all dead now type of situation, which is kind of interesting because it ties in with Supergirl's storyline this season, well, previous season too, of like there being, hating aliens, because metahumans aren't as populating Earth 38, at least National City to a certain degree. They're there, but they don't populate as much as aliens, just because it's like, yeah, the Flash is mainly the meta show while Supergirl is more the alien show. So there's that whole aspect to it too. So What's interesting though is when Cisco was trying to use his powers earlier, he's like, I'm sorry, I don't know what was going on there. Like, I'm wondering is the fact is that he got his hands cut by Cicada's blade, is that going to affect his powers going forward? Like, his powers might go a little haywire because that blade can negate abilities. Maybe some of it is still in his wounds, infecting it, making it so his powers won't really fully work. So it does seem like it is like a temporary thing. Like I said, Cisco's situation might be a little different. But what's so interesting is the fact is Nora was like, Cicada, and Barry's like, who's Cicada? Like, she knows who he is. That also comes back to the fact that she's like, Dad, and then he stopped the moment like Nora said that. So I'm assuming this has to go back to what I thought. The fact is that he is a like it must have something to do with his daughter or something, or a child. Like, he lost a child. I would assume daughter just because he stopped when he saw Nora and she said Dad. It made him think about like his own child he lost, probably because of a metahuman, hence why he wants them all dead. That's what I'm kind of throwing out there ahead of time. But what's interesting is the fact is that Nora knows him. So that's why I was wondering, like, is he a future villain or is he a villain that scares Nora because the Flash Museum, she's like, she knows how scary and deadly this guy is. It might have something to do with Team Flash too, in a sense of like, oh, like some people have died because of him. Maybe someone on Team Flash dies, So I don't know. That's kind of like where my thought process is on that for right now. We'll kind of have to wait till the next episode to see like where all this goes. I'm curious what the whole like breathing mask thing is for too. Like, the whole kind of got the name because of the sound it makes and stuff like that. So like I said, I'm very interested to find out more about this villain and hence the connection with Nora and the whole like why he stopped before he could stab Barry thing. Because once again, that also shows you too, he's not distinguishing. Like, it doesn't matter meta or like good or bad. The fact of the matter is he wants you dead, and he wants all metas dead, so he wants all metas dead. What's interesting too is we know that they're temporary and stuff like that, but the fact of the matter is when he stabbed Block, are her powers gone forever, or will they eventually come back? Hence why I'm kind of going back to the whole Cisco thing. Like, he might end up losing his powers forever, potentially, even just from being cut by it. But in the long run, like I said, we'll just kind of have to wait and see what goes down in the future with all of this. And now moving on to this week's episode of Black Lightning. Quite a few things to kind of break down about this episode. First of all, there's still the whole Tobias situation, which is interesting. He's slapping Khalil around. Every time Khalil makes a wrong move in the chess game they're playing, he's like, oh, check, slaps him. Because he blames him for Cyanide's death. It's like, you weren't there for her. Now it's like, oh yeah, checkmate. You lost your queen just like you lost Cyanide, and just kind of beats the crap out of him. Well, doesn't beat the crap out of him, but it hits him pretty damn hard. What I also find fascinating is the fact is that Tobias is tying up a lot of loose ends. Like, he ends up killing one of his old right-hand men, Marcellus, and even kills this cop. He gets like some evidence necessary. I guess this is all stuff connected to Alvin, because that's what he went to Marcellus about. We don't know what was in the evidence the cop gave him, but I'm assuming it's because what he's trying to build, this empire using meta-humans as weapons and stuff like that, what's happening, he can't have anyone stopping him, and I guess like any stuff from his past could be used against him while he's trying to head in this direction, potentially. So I think probably the most direct thing he's probably handled, because probably a lot of other stuff was handled indirectly. The whole Alvin thing was something he did himself. There was even the whole, like, we know that Jeff saw it, so maybe Jeff's testimony's there or something like that. So I don't know, I'm curious to see what that's all about, because I was like, why bring that up after all these years? It's been like 30 years, and yet you are only now acting upon it. So I feel like the only circumstances that have really changed is that. So I'm curious. There's still the whole Kara situation. We never checked on her in this episode, but last time we saw her, she was pretty messed up. So I'm only assuming she managed to get away, jumping through the window like that. Not unless that's supposed to be implying that she killed herself to get away, but I thought that was kind of implying that she got away from him. So I don't know. So that he wouldn't like torture her or whatever. So but we'll kind of have to see it in the long run. But still, that whole cyanide thing still got me tripped out. I was not expecting him to kill her. I guess he can't do whatever it was that he did to Lala to bring him back. Maybe he just doesn't have the resources necessarily to do it, or maybe it's only a set circumstances you can, like, it has to be under special conditions that lets you do that potentially. So we'll see in what ends up happening about that, because it's like, can't you just bring cyanide back like did Lala? But I guess not. There's another interesting element to this episode too. It's the whole Anissa thing. Like, I think this is kind of showing that Anissa's kind of getting a little cocky. She's starting to feel herself a lot. Like, she's kind of getting sucked up into, like, because like this whole thing, because we saw it a little bit previously when she was like robbing the bad guys to give money for people. I think she's like, yeah, she has the best of intentions and stuff like that, but I think she's letting it get to her head. She's kind of like, this is kind of becoming her everything, which even Jeff balances everything. It's like his responsibility is Black Lightning, but also as Jefferson Pierce. Like, he doesn't let it completely consume him. He doesn't do this for the glory, but it seems like, the way this is kind of showing off, bowing and stuff like that. Even seeing it kind of affecting her personal life, because she's hitting it off, being all flirtatious and very like forward with this like musician. She's like hooking up with whatever their situation is. I don't know if like they're exclusive, like whatever the whole deal is. Like, the way Anissa was kind of spitting game with her, it's like, yo, you being like super forward. I was like, wow, that okay. I mean, to be fair, we don't really see what she's like when it comes to like to dating a lot. Because I was wondering about that too. I was like, what about the whole Grace situation? Grace shows up and everything, and then this is like, yo, sorry, I was kind of dealing with stuff, so sorry I didn't get back to you. It's like, well, she was figuring everything out. She was going all vigilante. And then Grace is like, yeah, well, I got work to do. And you have Anissa looking at her like, what's her problem? It's like, like, she thought you two hit it off, and now she finds you with another woman. It's just kind of like, which I think at the same time could be said like, well, when you actually look at it, it's kind of like she bounces from people to people. It's like she was with her girlfriend, and she was with Grace, and so, but to be fair, maybe, like I said, maybe it's just kind of like her powers are kind of getting to her. Like, she feels good, she feels great. It's even interesting, just kind of like from a scientific point of view. I mean, it's just an interesting thing. It's like, oh yeah, like apparently, like because of like their powers and stuff like that, Jennifer and Anissa haven't had any cramps with their periods. It's just a small detail, but I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I'm curious to see what happens with this whole Anissa thing. We do see that Jeff is kind of like coming down on her, being like, oh, if you don't tighten up, you're going to end up in a casket. And she's like, okay, Dad, you need to sing another song. It's just because he knows, like, if you're not keeping your wits about you, if you get reckless, like the way she's acting now, probably because in his younger age, when he started off as Black Lightning, he was probably the same way, and he knew there are consequences for letting your guard down, especially like with Tobias and Khalil still being a danger. Like, one slip up could be the end of everything, because if she's not careful, I mean, especially with how her power works, like, to be invincible, she needs to breathe. Like, she's working on it and everything, but she gets too cocky, she lets her guard down, it could be the end of her, so he's coming at her as both a partner in this crime fighting thing, but also as a father, so. And there's also the whole Jennifer situation with Khalil. Khalil kind of comes to her. I wasn't expecting Jennifer to go out there and just push him off like that. I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming, but he bounced back. And he ends up talking about the fact that it's kind of trying to make her explain, because it's like, she's like, you killed Black Lightning. It's like, why does that bother you so much? He saved me from the 100s. Like, can't let him know that's your dad. Especially because you don't know what Khalil would do with that information. Maybe before, I mean, probably even before, you would have been even more hesitant. But now, like, well, you would have been hesitant before, but you're even more so now, because Khalil literally tried to kill your dad. Wasn't what he was trying to do, but still he played a role in it. But it's like, hey, he's okay. You attacked the school and everything too. But for him, it's like, I owe Tobias. If I don't do this, he would kill me. And just sound like Khalil's like, I can't forget about you, I think. Because it seemed like Khalil was just kind of, I guess those early stages, it seemed like he was kind of full of himself too, because he didn't want to hear what anyone had to say. He was just so pissed off at the world. But I think he's kind of finally cooled down, especially because he sees what Tobias is capable of, and he's scared of Tobias and everything. So, but another element to it, interestingly enough, is like, yeah, I still care about you, Jennifer. Like, he can't let that side of him and things go. But Jennifer kind of pushes him away, because it's like her powers start activating. And I guess it's like a combination of, I can't trust you with the information of knowing about my powers. Two, like, if you know about my powers, you might put two and two together about me being Black Lightning's door, so maybe there's an element to it too. So it's going to be interesting to see whether Khalil 100% gives up on Jennifer or not. I doubt it, but like I said, we'll have to wait and see on that front. We did see her kind of bond with Issa, so I thought that was kind of neat. He kind of coming over and we learned a little bit more about his ability in the sense of he does make people tell the truth, but it's only when he makes eye contact. His power is always activating when he's talking, when he asks people, when he, it's always active, but it takes like him not looking at you for it not to affect. So that's kind of an interesting aspect to it. Sadly, we also end up learning about his ability in the sense of like, because of the green light situation, he will die because he got his powers through artificial means like that. Like it's breaking down his body and eventually he'll die. Two choices: either get in a pod and wait for a cure, or live the rest of your life and eventually die. So he chose the latter just because it's like, enjoy what time you have left, and but he's still going to be checking in with Lynn. It's kind of interesting with the whole like Odell situation, because it isn't just Proctor that had the whole like, let's weaponize metahumans. The ASA seems like they have that all lined up too, because he's kind of like, if we can contain it, that could be very useful. So it's kind of like, okay, you've got your douchebag motives too, but Lynn's trying to pretend like she's all on board with all this while she's secretly trying to find a way out of this for all the kids. Like, because if she can find a means to curing all of them and getting rid of their metahuman abilities and stuff like that, the ASA would have no reason to keep the people in the pods anymore. It would change things with the whole green light situation, which, speaking of the pods, we had one person waking up and blasting one of the doctors. I guess using his powers put such a strain on his body that it ended up killing him as well. It did beg the question of why did a pod fail? What made him wake up? But I guess it's just like it's just because the pod fell and it made him wake up. So another girl woke up named Wendy. Her powers is aerokinesis, manipulates the wind to the point she could even like break through a thick what's that, cement wall fairly easily. So she kind of goes on a little rampage until Jeff kind of stops her. He zaps her. And she goes back into the pod at the end of the episode, but it's still that situation of like, how do we help these people? Like, Lynn is still making progress, trying to figure everything out, but it seems like it's still a long road ahead before we make any like heavy progress in that regard. So it's definitely going to be like, it's definitely interesting in that regard with the whole like Lynn balancing, trying to pretend like she's just working with the ASA, and obviously having Odell kind of being smug, kind of being a douchebag. It's kind of like, you kind of, it's like, you can't help but feel like literally everyone a part of the ASA is a douchebag in some shape or form. Just the way they act, the way they're handling this situation, that they kind of not even looking at these people as people, looking at them as something else, kind of like, looking at them as dangerous criminals and stuff like that. So there's that avenue of things. But another aspect to this is the whole situation with Jeff, where he's being replaced as principal by a new guy named Mike Lowry, and Napier is telling him like, you got to be 100% behind it. It's like, because it's a white guy. Because the big problem with that is it's kind of like, with him at the forefront, it's like, okay, like he's leading the school, showing like, the great potential that Garfield has. But if it's a white guy there, then it kind of creates this perception of like, it's the white guy here to save all the black folk, because it's a predominantly black school. So like Jeff doesn't want the school to garnish such a reputation that it's like, it was okay, but everything's fine the moment the white guy steps in to save everything. He doesn't want everything to have that thought process, because he feels like they're doing this because they also want Jeff's 100% support. Because if Jeff, the pillar of the community, it's like, I support this 100%, there will be no backlash from the teachers, the media, the students. So like they're trying to spin it like that, And like I said, it's the whole aspect of consequences. Like I said, I love that being like, I don't know if I brought this up last episode, the little whole like title card thing that's new to this season that pops up, I'm not just like the logo title card opening, but just like the title of the episode thing. I might have brought it up last episode, but I don't know. Like I said, I like that this is all about consequences all across the board. Khalil's suffering his consequences. Now Jeff is suffering his. We kind of see that all across the board. I'm sure we're probably going to be seeing Anissa's at some point in time, just from like the way she's kind of handled things, but also from everybody. Jeff's in this case is like losing his position. Granted, it was still this beautiful moment of like what he usually says to his students, they said back to him, you know, and I thought that's kind of nice, and it put a smile on his face. And because to him, he isn't completely done because he'd still be a teacher. The big question now is, where do we go from here with all of this? Like I said, ultimate question, like being like, what is Tobias up to of him cleaning house like that and stuff like that? What was it exactly that he got in that briefcase from Proctor? Like, is it green light? Is it like what was in the vaccine that created metahumans in the first place? Because green light gives him like, it sprouts up, you know, metahumans here and there, but, you know, that's probably not the way he wants to go about it. He probably wants to use whatever's in that vaccine to make more metahumans in that regard, because it's like that way, less of the ramifications of like the green light situation with like Asa, for example, you know? So we'll just kind of have to wait and see what goes down on all fronts and see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.